will Jesus really keep his promise? Is a question that believers, non-believers have, because of course they're on this journey where they are seeking some sort of some substantiation, some evidence, some objectivity to the whole story behind God and Jesus. And so they're familiar with the story of this man named Jesus who lived on earth about 2,000 years ago, who eventually died. Well, if they don't believe that, we've already covered that. We showed how, in fact, that evidence shows that there was indeed a person named Jesus who lived at the time that the Bible says that he did. And he died, and he was crucified. He was put to death, just the way the Bible says it. But this is still a question. So that now this is more like a follow-up question by the non-believers. So, okay, let's say that I accept that he's real and he did some wonderful things. But this whole promise about him returning, how can I believe that? So we're asking this question, and we're going to look at this closely. Will Jesus really keep his promise? So the first thing we want to do is we want to take a look at what he said. What was this promise? So in John 14, 1-3, it says, "Don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God and trust also in me. There is more than enough room in my Father's home. If this were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? When everything is ready, I will come and get you so that you will always be with me where I am." Okay, so this is the promise in question that many are asking. Will he return? He made plenty of promises about how things would be once you got there. But the first one that needs to be answered is, will he return? So is Jesus's word good enough? That's the question that many will ask, those who are not believers. And so let's start by taking a look at some things that, well, if you're old enough to have noticed, as you drive around the country, as you drive around the city, as you look through magazines, as you surf the internet, that there is this pronouncement, this proclamation that Jesus is returning. One of his, I dare say it's his biggest promise, that he is coming back to get those who believe, those who are on his team. And so we see these signs, Jesus is returning again. Jesus is coming back. We see perched on top of churches and buildings that the message that Jesus is returning, that he's coming back. But people have been saying this for centuries. People have been proclaiming that Jesus is coming back, well, almost since the day that he left. And that's been about 2,000 years ago. But he hasn't come. Do they have a point? Perhaps this everything that he mentions in the Bible. Remember that scripture said that when everything is ready, that I'll return. Perhaps everything will never be ready, as it turns out, as the Bible said in John. So curious themselves, and like any typical inquiring mind, his closest followers, the disciples, they asked Jesus himself as well, when will it happen? When will you be back, Jesus? When will you return? So he responded in what has become a widely studied chapter of the Bible, Matthew 24. And this will form the basis for our discussion presentation today. This is what he says in Matthew 24, and there's more to it. We're only going to read a few verses, but you really should, particularly if you're a non-believer, you should read, try this chapter out. Try this chapter out and just read it and see what it says. But we're going to take it from verses 3 to 5. And it says this, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Because they were curious about this whole idea of the end of age and the end of time. There are different labels for different phases of what's considered the end time or the end of certain phases of history. But they were curious to know what was going to happen just before he returned, or what should they look for, because they weren't for certain. For all they knew, he was going to return again during their lifetime. Now we know that that did not happen, but that's what they believed. But they asked Jesus, what should we look for? And so he answered them and said, watch out that no one misleads you, for many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ. And he goes on to talk about a list of things that would happen before he would return. And so we have this list. Matthew 24 provides a list, and there are other parts of the Bible that provides other things that we should look for his soon return. But Matthew 24 puts together perhaps, or provides perhaps, the most extensive list of things that we should look for. And so we're going to take a look and we're going to walk through some of these things. So we're going to see if they've happened. He said, look for this. And then when this happens, then we will be near. That everything will be ready will almost be true. That will be true. So we're looking for, as he said in John, when everything is ready, then I'm going to return. And so everything being ready, that constitutes being ready, is formulated in part by this list. So let's take a look. Things that must happen before Jesus returns. Well, 1, people will come in my name saying that I am the Christ. All right. That you will hear of wars and rumors of wars, that nations will rise up in arms against nation and kingdoms against kingdoms, and there will be famines. So let's look at number 1 a little bit closely. People will come in my name saying, I am the Christ. Now, I know there will be some who will say, well, Stan, there were people during the time of Jesus who came and claimed to be the Messiah, the chosen one, the anointed one, the one, the Savior. So how can you be, how do you reconcile that? That's been going on for forever, hasn't it? Well, the answer is yes. I mean, there were plenty of occasions since the time that Jesus walked the earth where there were individuals who arose and claimed to be the person, Jesus, to be the Christ. But they were quite, I don't know, they're quite spaced out. They were here and there. There's something a bit unique about this day and age that we are living. And in the latter part of the 20th century, last century, that causes one to really take a look and say, is this different with regard to this question that people will come in my name saying I am Christ? Is it different from the way that it's been in centuries past? I think that a reasonable mind would agree. Let's begin with our first example. Alvaro Theus, I believe is how his name is pronounced, but AKA Henry Cristo. This is what he goes by now. He's a Brazilian religious leader, and he's still living, by the way, and he claims to be the incarnation of Jesus. During times past when individuals came and claimed to be Jesus or to be the Messiah, they were met with much skepticism, to put it kindly. If we read the writings of historians and individuals who were chronicling the times of past, centuries ago, surely there were individuals who came and claimed to be Jesus, but they were met with high skepticism. People just didn't believe that they were who they said they were. Particularly Christians, people who were believers in the Bible, in Jesus, when counterfeits, as you would have it, appeared on the scene, no one believed them. No one really believed them, not the believers. In today's age, however, that is not the case. That's what makes this particular era, this particular point in time in which we are living, different from all those other times. These individuals who are coming with a level of persuasion that has believers convinced that they are, in fact, Jesus. Henry Cristo is one. There is another, Alan John Miller. He is, where are my notes here? He's out of Australia. I think it's Queensborough, Australia. He has this ministry that's called the Divine Truth, part of some new spiritual movement, or relatively new. He's been around at least in the 2000s that I'm aware of. His nickname is AJ. I think that's what his followers refer to him as. But he claims to be, as he puts it, Jesus of Nazareth. Now, not only that, his partner, not his wife, but his partner, and yeah, I guess I should share her name. Mary Suzanne Luck is her name. She says that she is Mary Magdalene. So from Henry Cristo to Alan John Miller, we have individuals who are doing more than just saying that they are Jesus. I mean, they are really getting into character, and they are making claims, and they are starting movements, and they have churches, and they have many followers who believe that they are Jesus. So we have another, though. His name is Jose Luis de Jesus Miranda. I don't know. Is anyone familiar with any of these characters these individuals, that I've mentioned? And have you heard of anyone else who would fit the script, who would actually qualify as an individual who is not only claiming to be Jesus, but they, by well, I can't say all intents and purposes, but by and large, they're doing everything to convince the world, as well as their followers, that they are Jesus. So is there anyone else? Anybody? So please put in a thread and share with us. But this guy, Jose Luis de Jesus Miranda, is yet another. Creciendo en Gracia is the name of his movement, or his church, his organization. And he claims to not only be the return phase, what he refers to as the return phase of Jesus Christ. Not really sure what that means. But he also claims to be, get this, the Antichrist. Now, I thought this one was quite unique, because up until this point, everyone who's claimed to be Jesus has only claimed to be Jesus alone. After all, Jesus is he's the hero. He's the one. He's the one with the wonderful character, the good person, the one who embodies good. And so, who wouldn't want to mimic? If you had to think about it, who wouldn't want to mimic Jesus or be like Jesus? But this guy here, Jose Luis, claims to not only be Jesus, but to be the Antichrist, all embodied in one individual. I don't know. I thought that was just, I can't really put a finger on that. I'm not sure what the strategy is. I'm not sure where he was going with that. So Jose Luis, out of the two that I've shown, is the only one who is deceased right now. So he died in 2013. And there's actually an interesting story surrounding his death. So he died in the latter part of 2013. And reports went out in August of 2013 that he had died. And then that was allowed to set in, and believers were convinced, they were persuaded that he was dead. And then next month, it was reported that he's not dead. And proof was shown that he was not, in fact, dead, that he was still alive. Now, consequently, 2 months later, in November, he did, in fact, die. I'm told that he died, or I read that he died of liver cirrhosis. But I just thought it was just, fascinating that, is this taking it a step further by showing, by letting these reports go out that he's dead, and then a month later change the report and say, no, he's not dead, he's alive. I mean, if this doesn't sound like someone trying to embody all the attributes of Jesus, from being alive and then being dead and then resurrected, I don't know what is. But he, in fact, did die with certainty 2 months later in November of 2013. Number one is satisfied. I think that we can safely say, and there are more. There are so many more, in fact, that individuals who have come up in the 20th and 21st century who have claimed to be Jesus, that we just don't have time to cover them all. So if it's okay with you, we'll cross this one off and we'll say that this has been sufficiently satisfied, number one. So number two, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. What about this prediction? So again, what we're talking about is, can we trust that Jesus's promise of returning is something that we can bank on? Can we bank on that? And so we're analyzing whether or not this promise of his that he will return, that he'll make good on it. And we're doing so by looking closely at what he said would happen before. So he said that there are going to be some things that will happen before he comes. And well, let's look at those things. If we look at those list of things that he said would happen, perhaps we can formulate a basis for belief. Perhaps we can say, well, you know what? If he said this was going to happen, then perhaps we'll believe that he will, in fact, return. So number two, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. What about this prediction? What about this prediction? This is probably too far back for most of you who are watching to most certainly have seen, but you may have seen archives of newspaper reports about wars and rumors of wars. And this one, let's see, can I even see that with clarity? I think this is just, is this 1912? Yeah, most certainly there's no one who was around. I think the oldest person who's living today now was born after this date, 1912. And also President Wilson, that gives us indication that at the time it was President Wilson. The U.S. is at war. So what are they referring to? Well, they're referring to World War I, of course. And we know, well, before World War I, there was the Mexican-American War. And if we go back into the 1800s, we've got the War of 1812. We've got the Revolutionary War. If we go back to the 18th century and the 1700s. But if we come into the 20th century, the 1900s, we've got World War I. We've got the Mexican-American War. We've got World War II. I mean, this list is long of wars. So when the Bible says, or what Jesus said, that there would be, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. Well, in this particular case, this is not just a rumor of war, but we know, in fact, from history that these wars did take place. But the list is long. World War I, World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam War. Let's see, the what was the one in the early 90s? I believe that was the Persian Gulf War. And if anyone is wondering whether this, well, no one said that it wasn't a world war. It most certainly qualified as a world war when you have the combination of countries, multiple countries, that come together and participate in the war. And Persian Gulf War, in fact, was that. And then you've got the war, forget the one around 9/11. I think it was, Iraqi freedom. I mean, and that's not it. There are other wars too. So when we consider the 20th and now 21st century, we have a long list of wars that began as a rumor, and then they materialized into an all-out, full-fledged battle, fighting, where many deaths were the result. So now, when we look at this question, or when we look at this criterion, did Jesus speak truthfully? Did he prophesy accurately when he said that before I return, well, he hasn't come yet, but we're talking about what he said was going to happen. This item, wars and rumors of war. Is there any other time in Earth's history where this many wars, and wars that include, again, the participation of countries from all sides, or from many fronts, many countries, participation? Is there any other time when that can be said that it happened? I don't know if anyone can share with me, because if I know my history correctly, there is no time. Surely there have been wars that have taken place, and there have been smaller battles within countries, infighting, civil wars. But wars that will qualify on this level and with this frequency, I dare say, absolutely not. In fact, I do more than dare say. I say emphatically that there has been no other time. So, wars and rumors of wars, was Jesus on point? Did he make a prediction that came to pass? I think a reasonable mind would agree that, in fact, he did. Well, how about nations will rise up in arms against nation, and kingdom against kingdom? And so this sort of, I understand, some people are going to say, well, Stan, number 3 sounds just like number 2. Well, I mean, I get it. It does. There is some overlap, but there's also some distinction. And I would just point to you this here. This is a Time magazine cover. It is June 3rd, 1985. Who has the bomb? The nuclear threat is spreading. So one of the distinctions between this and just the rumors of war, and wars and rumors versus wars, is the fact that during the 80s, well, as I remember it, this arms race, even if you're too young to have lived to see it on the news when it happened, you've probably studied this and some part of your American or quite possibly world history. But during this time, so this started in the 60s, the late 50s to 60s, when Russia in particular and the United States were in this. They began this arms race. They began this race to become the most powerful nation on earth. And they were doing this by building a stockpile, improving and advancing bombs and weaponry. And of course, America shocked the world during World War II with the atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. After that, people were like, whoa, America has this something that can just wipe us all out. We had better do something about it. And Russia was one of the ones to take up the baton and say, hey, you know what? I know we were friendly during World War II, but hey, I don't know, you guys might turn on us. So there was this arms race. And I remember as a kid growing up in the 80s, having this fear that there was going to be a World War III. There was talk of World War III so much, or at least in my mind, it was so much. And I was afraid. I thought there was going to be another war, and people were going to be dying around us. It was just going to be this big explosion like I had seen in the videos of the atomic bomb dropping in Japan. And I was just filled with fear, but there was just always this constant talk of who has the most bombs, who has the biggest stockpile. Now we move to the 21st century, and it's no longer a dual country race between in stockpiles, America versus Russia or the then Soviet Union, but China is in it, India is in it. Pakistan has nuclear bombs, nuclear technology and nuclear bombs. North Korea claims to have it. Iran claims to have it. It's not just a two-country game. And this isn't necessarily talking about war or rumor of war, but this is readying. This is countries readying themselves to go to war. And so does item number 3. Nations will rise up in arms against nation and kingdoms against kingdom. Might this qualify? Might these things that we've talked about qualify as satisfying the fulfillment of that prophecy? I think, again, that a reasonable mind, when carefully evaluating this, will say to themselves, draw the conclusion that, yes, in fact, that this has to be fulfillment. At what other time in Earth's history have we seen such a demonstration? So that leads us to our next one. There will be famines. Well, I think this one is actually pretty easy. Can we all agree that famines is fulfilled? I remember growing up, again, as a kid, that there would be these infomercials and these fundraising programs that would come on television, and they would talk about raising money to feed the hungry, feed people who were hungry in other countries. I mean, granted, we had people who were hungry in America as well, but there were always these major campaigns to feed starving children in different countries in Africa, different countries in Asia. And because there were famines that were taking place, there was a shortage, or there were famines for some reason. And I remember even in the church that I grew up in, there was this event that we used to do every year. It was called Ingathering. And what we would do is young and old alike would go out during Christmas time, and we would solicit donations of canned foods and money, again, to help contribute to these campaigns to help feed the hungry. And, it's just amazing that while there have been famines, most certainly all throughout time, that there just seem to be at such high frequency campaigns to feed hungers, or shall I put it, high frequency of famines taking place on the earth. So would you say that we could check off number 4 and say that this one is qualified? I think, again, once again, that anyone who's done their history, who's turned on their television and read articles, surfed the web, would agree that that famines are plenty, even though food is plenty in countries like America and other countries like us. So the list goes on, though. Number 5, there will be earthquakes in various places. King James Version of the Bible says diverse places. Just another term for various places around the world. I remember in my first career in engineering, I worked for an engineering firm, and we specialized in earthquake engineering. And so whenever earthquakes took place, we were in high demand because we did a lot of things that were related to heavy shaking, major shaking. Now, whether it was retrofitting bridges, making them stronger so that they could withstand the shaking of a yet stronger earthquake, or we were measuring soil. We were setting off explosives and measuring soil to try to determine what type of foundation buildings were being built on. And if the building wasn't solid enough, then we could give that in a report. But there was all this work that this firm that I worked for had due to earthquakes. And when I was working for them, business was good. This was in the early 90s. I mean, so we had during that time, if any of you who were living during that time, we had Whittier earthquake in 1987 in the Southern California area, Los Angeles. We had the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake in San Francisco, major earthquake. We had the 1994 Northridge earthquake right back into Southern California, another major earthquake, which I almost died, by the way. That's a testimony all in and of itself. Actually, I think I shared that testimony a year ago. But I should not be with you here because I should have died in the 1994 earthquake. I was crawling out of rubble. But the point I'm making is that there have been earthquake after earthquake recorded, and not just in California where people expect them, because we hear about California's got the San Andreas fault. So it's expected that earthquakes will come there. And in Japan, we know that there are major faults there. But as of late, and when I say as of late, I actually mean like the past 25 years or so, earthquakes have been taking place in lots of regions and areas across the world. I mean, there was a major earthquake, a substantial earthquake, I'll say, in New York City. I believe it was in the 90s. I can't remember that date. But we've been hearing about earthquakes taking place for a while now, and they have been everywhere, not just centered in one location, not just California, and not just Tokyo or Japan. So, number 5, there will be earthquakes in diverse places. Would you say that that's been sufficiently satisfied? Or how about handed over to be persecuted and killed? Well, Jesus was talking about followers of him. Have you turned on the news as of lately and heard about people who are professing to be Christian and they're being killed for it, if not persecuted? Or being persecuted, if not killed? Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're hearing about it more and more, it seems. Again, someone will say, well, Stan, I mean, what about the Christians who were killed in the Colosseum and during the height of the Roman Empire? Well, most certainly that was a period of time where people were handed over to be persecuted and killed. So if you want to say that that's qualification or that satisfies this criteria, I'm okay with that, because actually that's in the time past. So number 6 was satisfied before number 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 5. I'm okay with that, so long as it's satisfied. But number 6 has been satisfied. Number 7, many will be led into sin. Need we even look at this and attempt to examine this? I mean, this, by anyone's definition of sin, whether you're a believer or not, 2021 is the age. I mean, this past decade, arguably above any other decade, has been the decade of sin. Do what you want. I don't care what it is. You do what you want. You feel like doing it? Go ahead and do it. Does it hurt someone else? Does it offend someone else? Not that we're supposed to only do things that don't offend people. I understand that. I'm not saying that. But the point I'm making is that when it comes to sin, by anyone's definition, this is the time and age that is being done. People are being led into sin. Number 7 is satisfied sufficiently. Number 8, many will betray. As I pick things up, many will betray one another and hate one another. Would you say that that's been sufficiently satisfied as well? I think The answer is yes. Number 9, lawlessness will increase such that the love of many will grow cold. I mean, just turn on the news. Turn on the news. I don't know about you, but the news is just too depressing. It's always been depressing because of all the bad news that it shows versus the good news that it portrays. But it is just too depressing now. But just turn on the news and just watch for about 10 minutes, and you will get your fill of seeing the world in a state of lawlessness, such that you will believe that the love of many has grown cold. Number 10, and this gospel of the kingdom will be preached throughout the whole inhabited earth as a testimony to all nations. Well, that's a good one to look at, and we may need to come back to this one. But is the gospel of the Bible, the gospel of the Christian, being preached? Is it being talked about? Is it being broadcast throughout the entire earth? From the urban cities where radio and television and internet is prevalent, is prominent, to the jungles where tribes that have never made contact with modern civilization exist, even to those areas. So from one extreme to the area to the next, the gospel is being preached. Has it covered the whole entire earth and every individual or every tribe? Has everyone had a chance to hear it yet? That is the question. And that's why I said we should probably come back to that, or we'll leave that one unchecked. But let's look at number 11. And this is the final one on my list for today. Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe him, for false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. What about that? So how many of these have been fulfilled? Let's just kind of recap before we come to number 11. So we've put together our little list, and from 1 to 9 at least, I believe that we provided sufficient argument or information for a reasonable mind to draw the conclusion that yes, they in fact have been satisfied. Number 10, perhaps that's where the question mark remains. But what about number 11? What about number 11? Could that have been fulfilled? You know, I grew up again in a church that has done marvelous things, and a church that consequently has a lot of pride in those wonderful and marvelous things that they have done, or that they have been used by God to do. But there's this story of a group of individuals, a part of this church, that took things just a little bit too far. They took their thinking, their level of pride, and their thinking that they were so special that they could experience some things that the Bible said, no, that is not your prerogative. No, that is not what you get to enjoy down here on earth. So the story goes that there was this group of, a small group, there's a catchphrase, a small group of believers. By all intents and purposes, these were genuine believers, genuine Christians who wanted to do the will of God. And that's what they were doing up to a point. But they somehow, and I'm not sure the details of why they arrived at this thinking, but they came to the conclusion that, you know what, we should ask God for a special revelation, a special fulfillment. We want to do a special task for God. And so what ended up happening, I'm going to make this long story short. They asked God to send them an angel to give them a special message or a special mission to then go on for God, And well, this is something I'll just have to break and say, believers, don't pray for angels to come and give you a special message for God. Don't ask for the appearance of angels if it's not to save your life. Well, first of all, if you're going to pray for anything, just pray that God will save you. Let him decide how it will get done. But don't. It's really dangerous to pray for angels for a visit. But they did this, and they got a visit. They indeed got a visit from some being that masqueraded as an angel of God. Long story short, they got multiple visits. They got one visit, then they got another. And the angels were telling them, you guys are doing wonderful. You know what? God is pleased with you. And you know what? He has a special work for you. He has a special mission for you to go on. But you know what? Before he does that, before you go on that mission, you know, you're going to get a visit from Jesus. And, you know, this group of individuals had lost sight of everything that they should have been taught, fundamental in Scripture, that Jesus said that when he would return, that everyone would know it. But they believe they got a special visit, a secret visit by Jesus. Number 11, what did the Bible say? Look, here's Christ. There he is. Do not believe him. Therein, they had violated. They came into conflict with this point in Scripture. Number 11, Christ is coming secretly in the desert. If you read Matthew 24, you'll see where it says, if anyone says that he's coming in the desert, don't believe him. Don't go. Jesus said, don't go. Because when I come, everyone will know it. You won't have to be told to go somewhere. It's not going to be a secret. But they believe that Jesus made a secret visit. And after this visit, they got they were happy, excited. They got their mission. They got some more follow-up angelic visits. And eventually the angels told them to kill some people in their group because they weren't doing right. And then they carried it out. Now, with that said, I want to share with you number 11. There's a trailer for a documentary, a docudrama, if you will, that was produced by a friend and brother in the ministry of mine. His name is Chris Lane. And it's called Beware of Angels. And it chronicles a book written by an individual by the name of Roger Morneau by that same title, Beware of Angels. And it is a story. It's the real life story as it was told by individuals who were in this group. So I want to share with you this video.
They had prayed to see angels.
Yes, sir, and they have the car stop at 10th and Ranch.
No one knew that I was a disciple of the ascended master, spirit guide Joel Coe.
I could pierce that veil and see these spiritual beings that I thought were dead ancestors who have passed on and now have received these bodies.
If it was too dark, I'm like, well, I don't do dark. And all those books made me feel good.
Who do you serve? I said, no one. He said, no, everybody serves somebody. Now, who's it going to be? I said, well, myself, I guess. He said, so be it.
There is really no escape because there is nowhere to escape to.
I could see their faces because they weren't covered. What have I got myself into?
So fascinating docudrama about this story of individuals who believed that they were getting visits from angels of God when in fact they were actually angels of Satan, i.e. demons. So for non-believers, I know you probably say, okay, well, Stan, this is just a little bit much. I don't know about that one. And that's okay. The point that we wanted to make was we wanted to see whether we can rely on the promise of Jesus, if he says that he's going to return, can we believe that? Well, in order to help us decide whether we can believe that he's going to return, we looked at some things that he said were going to happen before he does return. And as we've painstakingly gone through that list of 11, we saw that, 9, I believe that even a non-believer would argue were sufficiently satisfied. Perhaps number 11 is the one that they might question. But for a believer, also, if you've had any questions about whether you think Jesus will make good on his promise, look at how we have gone through the list of things that he said would happen, and they've actually come to pass. So will you believe? So for my non-believing community, I don't know. If someone gets 9 out of 11, that's pretty good statistics. That's pretty good mathematics by anyone's definition. It's a nice high percentage. If they have said that would happen, 9 out of 11 things would happen, and up to this point in 2021, we can show that they have happened, there's a good chance statistically that anything else that individual, being Jesus, says will happen, will in fact happen. The thing that I would like to stress to my believing community is that, well, this, not only do I believe, and I want to reinforce the idea that, in fact, Jesus will make good on his promise and he will return as he said that he would, but that it's not that long. We are not that far off as we have gone through. And even just 30 years ago, we could look at this list, or perhaps let's say 40 years ago. 40 years ago, we could look at this list and there were still quite a few on there that were not satisfied. So in our lifetime, we have seen them get checked off one by one. But can we believe? Absolutely. When will he come? Oh, the word soon has never had greater meaning than it does today. No one knows the day nor the hour. But based on the evidence that Jesus said to look for, you don't have to subscribe to my belief, but I feel very confident it'll be in my lifetime, in this generation, this lifetime. Will Jesus really keep his promise? I believe that he will, based on the evidence, based on the things that Jesus said to look for, things that will happen. And he said these things almost 2,000 years ago, and they've happened. Just the way he's described them, wow, convincingly. I believe that he will, in fact, keep his promise. Not only that, I think that it will be very soon and in our lifetime.